Let all the buttons push themselves and all the sound come across. Yes, excellent, good. Hello, good evening, everybody.
Hey, folks, how are you?
It's apparently quite stormy at the moment, so if you have internet connection problems, you're not alone. It might be a little choppy in spots this evening. Hello, welcome to the stream. One of these days, I really need to get a short patter intro, which is not hello and welcome to an amazing episode of Dimension 20 spoken at warp 3.
Oh, thank you, Lavalish. I'm aware the shirt is a lot, and
it's nice.
I like it because it's a lot. So.
Sounds good. Good evening, everybody. Preemie, hey, hello, how are you?
Preemie.
We see lots of. Have you heard the news about Dimension 20? Yes, we will talk about it after the break. Oh my gosh, for sure. I have so many theories already just from the trailer. Exactly. How many things do we do in this stream?
Normally, we do 3 things on the show. The first one is...
Tonight, we're going to do 2, enthusiastically.
The first one is an opening monologue. This normally gives you a chance to get situated, get hydrated, get fed, make sure the dog and the Roomba are, plotting world domination. The usual stuff.
Or cat.
Hi,
Preemie. Hello, bastard man. How are you?
Or tiny bastard man.
The short is no more a lot than your good stuff. That's true. It is a very him short. Exactly.
However, a lot of the time, the opening monologue is basically what you're hearing right now.
Which is our baloney!
Then, we will cheese and bologna sandwiches for night cheese. Yep, that's going to happen. Focus, nerd.
All right.
Then we'll move on to the main event for the evening, which this evening is
the main cheese.
The big cheese.
We're workshopping. Roll with it, folks.
It's fine. Which this evening is an interview with the amazing Quantum.
What has happened to my chat? Why is it not visible? I am sad.
I will keep talking. Those of you who've been with us for the last few weeks will have heard us read There Is No ANTIMEMETICS Division, which is legitimately one of my favorite books of all time. It is stunningly good and incredibly inventive and imaginative.
We're going to spend most of the evening on picking it, and I'm very excited.
Yes. Those of you who want to read some more of Quantum's work, which I cannot recommend highly enough.
What are your buttons for this? Keep talking.
We will have some information in the chat via buttons directly. I can particularly recommend Valuable Humans in Transit and Other Short Stories. The anthology. There's some really, really good stuff in there.
I love the title of one of these stories called I Don't Know, Timmy, Being
a
God
god is a big responsibility.
Not being a god.
Being God.
Capital G. Not even typecase. Just singular is a big responsibility. I'm going to have to read that one. And we'll talk more about it. But yes, this evening we have a fantastic interview with There Is No ANTIMEMETICS Division author, Quantum. So a heads up for the chat. Quantum is appearing by video conference, but not visually. There will be a graphic representation of Quantum and subtitles so that everybody can be very well aware when Quantum is speaking and as we're having this conversation. So this will be a new experience for all of us this evening. It all looks really well working from a tech perspective. Everybody cross your fingers and knock on wood. But that's how we'll be having our conversation this evening. And then a couple of other things we should probably talk about. This is an interview, so it's very difficult to, know every topic we're going to discuss in advance. There is no tech support division. Okay, Shiny, get writing. There we go.
Well done.
Very well.
Good job.
So that means that topics may arise spontaneously and without a whole lot of warning. We've been talking about the content warnings for ANTIMEMETICS for several weeks now. So all of those content warnings may apply to the stream this evening. Maybe some more than others, but just so that everybody's on the same page. Those include common phobias, i.e. big ol' spiders, death and dying, horror themes, mental health and trauma, socio-political themes, violence, and of course, this is night cheese, so there's swearing to go around for those who are inclined. So that's what we're going to be doing this evening, and then we'll have a good long chat. We'll say good evening to Quantum, and then we will come back for the totes emotional, as I understand it, conclusion to our long-running shenanigans. So at the break, after we said goodnight to Quantum, you might want to just have a tissue nearby and something to cuddle, just in case. It'll be a quite cathartic, emotional conclusion to the hilarious night cheese stream that we've been running. I think that's everything. I mean, how are you? We did get another BFA nomination this week.
You chose this.
Well, you going out on a bang, Shiny? What a surprise. Exactly.
We are delighted to report that Pseudopod and Podcastle are up for the Best Audio British Fantasy Award. Also delighted to report 2 of the people that we're in competition with are shows we've never heard of before.
Which is
one of my favorite
I
things.
love getting introduced to new stuff. And
One of the-
Naomi, where are you? The Secret of St. Kilda is also a British Fantasy Award finalist for Best Audio, which is fantastic. We are very excited for that.
If they win, and if I get an opportunity to do part of the thank you speech, you know what the first line will be.
I'm going to have a mental note, pack the t-shirt.
There it is.
There we go. There we go.
There it is. Oh, yes, and of course we will have shenanigans to round things off.
Do we need shenanigans for the shenanigans? I don't know, Lavalicia. It's a good question. We might have to improvise something.
So yes, Pseudopod and Podcastle are BFA Audio Award finalists.
That is 3 for Podcastle this year. They are a Hugo finalist, they are a BFA finalist, and they are an Ignite finalist.
And the full lid's a Best Non-Fiction
and the full lid is up for Best Nonfiction again, which is delightful.
Yes. It's up against the Terry Pratchett bio, so I'm not buying a new shirt.
Yeah, no. Honor to be nominated. All of that good stuff. So the British Fantasy Awards will be announced in September. I think it's in Birmingham.
It is in Birmingham.
I don't know. We'll figure out.
Birmingham,
exactly. But let's get to the main event.
Yes, indeed.
So do you want to introduce Quantum anymore? I'm going to read their bio from their website.
I think you should.
I am Quantum, a writer and software developer. I wrote There Is No Antimemetics Division, Raw, and Valuable Humans in Transit and Other Stories, the latter including the short stories Lena, The Difference, and I Don't Know, Timmy, Being God is a Big Responsibility. I'm enthusiastic about time zones, time travel, and calendars. These are all links, by the way, and I'm going to go follow them at the break. I think Unicode is the best thing in computers, and I believe that correctly structuring and normalizing data is an important social issue. Write that down. I was at one point the world authority on the true location of Springfield, and may still be the world authority on destroying the Earth. God, this is a great bio.
It really is.
If I appeared on Mastermind, my specialist subject would be Futurama. Hold on a second. I'm going to put here very shortly. I was Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 2006. That is a deep cut if you are my age. I created Absurdal. Oh, I hear laughing. This is good. This is good. Okay, let's just go ahead and switch over while I finish that. I created Absurdal, Hatress. I need to know what Hatress is. And Base 65536. I occasionally write programming tutorials. So welcome very much. So I got a they're not needed to Quantum. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And I want to say, first of all, before we do anything else, thank you for your readings. I have enjoyed them a great deal. They have been, as you say, one story told well.
That's really sweet. Thank you so much. We had a fantastic time with the book. So I come very late into the SCP creepypasta kind of phenomenon. Grownard here. I think practically cut his. Do you need to scoot over a little bit?
I'm good.
You're a bit cropped off camera. I'm sorry. Cut his teeth on them, and I think the SCP hard copy RPG books are on our shelf in the other room. So I didn't know anything about it, and Alasdair was trying to explain it to me, and so I go poking around, and I think I found one of the Antimemetics short stories. I'm like, hey, this is really good. And he's like, book! And I was like, oh, okay. So I start reading and I'm like, I either need to finish this all tonight or I need to commit to not sleeping. One of the two.
It is a short enough book that you can actually marathon it in a long evening.
Yeah.
It can be done. It's less than 300 pages, I think. So yeah.
But by the time I got further into it, I was like, no, I need to slow down. I need to savor this. This is very chewy. And then the character perspective started changing. And then I was like, wait, no. I need to start over. And then I started the book over and then finished it all the way through.
Mm-hmm. So the thing is, you probably read the book an extremely small number of days. It took me a lot longer than that to write. And you imagine the experience of reading it as it was coming out, with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months between chapters sometimes. But the point is, when it comes out slowly like that, everyone has the time to digest. They don't have a choice to digest and reflect. Yeah. Whereas when it's all in book form, it's just completely condensed. And I think it can hit a little harder.
We have several author friends in the chat, I know. And I know one of the common topics of conversation we have is the speed at which people inhale your creative product versus the speed at which you write it, and how that is both wonderful and infuriating.
Oh, yeah. I think for written fiction, it's actually not so bad. If you think about any movie and how many names show up in the credits at the end, this was like 2 years of work for 1,500 people, and it's gone in 2 hours.
Exactly.
Like or less. The numbers are very interesting for any work of creative fiction. I think the numbers are a little heartbreaking. How long it takes to produce versus how quickly it is to consume.
Do you ever find that like influences your process of writing? Are you ever like?
Yes.
Oh, do you want to talk about that a bit more?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I'm writing serially, and I know that people have been waiting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months for the next chapter, I'm like, well, I want to make this chapter count. I don't do filler because I write very slowly, relatively speaking. A lot of people who do write much faster than I do. So I write
like Shiny Opals in the chat here, who knocks out these 60,000 word fan fictions in seemingly days, like they were descended from the heavens and dropped on a doorstep.
Yeah, it's mad. I have a lot of respect for people who have that kind of work ethic and also the ability to just create quality text at that sort of speed. I have a lot of respect for that. I can't do that. So I try to make every chapter count. I try to make it dense. I try to make it so that there's a decent, hard story beat in every chapter so that I'm not wasting your time, you know?
Ask a question. I'm going to try to futz with something.
trying to futz with something.
Yeah.
I am an immense structure nerd. I love how stories are built and stories are structured. And I'm curious as to how your process helped with how the story is structured. Because this is one of the most perfectly designed pieces of fiction from an architectural point of view I think I've ever encountered. And I'm really curious as to how many diagrams you had.
Well, okay, so thank you very much for the compliment. This isn't my first rodeo. This is my, let me get this right, 4th serial novel that I wrote basically chapter by chapter, publishing them to the web, with increasing degrees of readership and decreasing degrees of me having experience and knowing what I'm doing. So serial fiction is a whole different can of worms from just writing a novel. Because a novel, you write it, and you give it to an editor, and then you go back and change stuff. With serial fiction, once chapters 1 through 8 are out, you're done. You're locked in. If you made a bad decision in chapter 2, that's it. You're done. And Antimemetics is no exception. There's a bit in SCP-3125, which is a chapter, it's about halfway through the book. There's a monologue from Adam, which was very, very, very inconvenient later on. I wrote that, and I had to make it true because it's kind of a flash forward. I'm like, I'm completely locked into this, and I really wish I could change some of this, but like hundreds and hundreds of people have read it already, so I'm stuck.
It becomes almost like soap opera writing or like EastEnders writing. It's like, it's the improvers, yes, and you can never say no, but you just have to build on top.
No, you're very limited in what you can go back and edit retrospectively. So there's a ton of forward planning. And so I got a huge directory over here full of notes and rewrites and well, okay, I'm going to show you. This is kind of an Easter egg, but if you go to my website, go to quantum.org/scp, scroll down a bit, you're going to find some deleted scenes. You're going to find some stuff that I omitted. Now, every single one of these scenes was removed for a good reason. And some of them you're going to read and you're going to go, I see why that's not in there. That makes no sense, or that doesn't contribute anything, or that's just rubbish. But you will get some insight into my creative process and why the story went in some directions but not in other directions.
Nice.
So there's that. So that's one of the reasons that takes me so long, is a whole lot of second guessing, a whole lot of writing something and going, you know what, this is wrong. Let's cross it all out, start over.
Or writing it and then having to think not just about like what's immediately before it and what's immediately next, but what is significantly before it and significantly next.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to I'm not sure if this is a good analogy, but it's kind of trying to land on the moon. You know where the moon is roughly, and you want to land on the moon somewhere. There isn't a specific crater you're aiming at. I know that isn't how it actually works when you're trying to really land on the moon. But
when you're playing Outer Wilds and you want to land on the planet,
there's almost literally an arc, and you'll rise to the top of that story arc, and you go, right, I know roughly where I want this to land. I know roughly, like, emotionally where we want to be towards the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
What open threads are in progress right now? What are the satisfactory ways to wrap these up? What should be the last one? What should be the second to last one? And a lot of it kind of guides itself to that point. So a lot of it is just forward planning and experience from having written serials and gotten completely stuck towards the end of that serial and gone, wow, I made a bunch of really bad decisions here, and now I can't really do a good ending. Well, I just have to do the best ending possible under the circumstances. So a lot of this is just experience. The other aspect of it, which guided the way this works, is the nature of the SCP Wiki itself. Unlike something like AO3, which is heavily organized around like serialized stories that are published chapter by chapter by chapter, and people keep up with that. The normal way in which most people interact with the SCP Wiki is they just browse. They kind of dip in and out. They go to most recent pages and just click something at random.
That's what I did. Yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
Exactly. So your reader experience is the one that I was thinking about mostly when I was writing this. And that experience is one where you're going to dive in and you're going to hit chapter 7. And chapter 7 is no use to you by itself. And if it says at the top, this is chapter 7, you're going to go, oh, I'm not reading this. I can't be bothered to read 6 other chapters. You might jump back to chapter 1, or you might not, or you might just go and find something else. So if you look carefully, you'll see probably, I'd say like 60, 70% of this book can just be read as a single chapter by itself.
Oh my
right.
God,
yeah. And that's it's really interesting you raise that, because I'm a short fiction editor by background, and one of the number one things you always talk about to authors when they are submitting short fiction is that chapters of novels rarely stand alone sufficiently as a short story. You know, they're designed to be interlinked. Yep. They have dependencies on other portions of the broader narrative. And I think that is one of the reasons I found this book so compelling in a brand new to me, like, genre was, okay, that was discrete and I understand what happened, but I desperately need more. And what I'm about to get is more, but not linearly necessarily. It's like, okay, now I have a piece of the world building, which is changing my perspective on the original content. And now as I go forward, I have a third perspective. I'm almost like triangulating a story in the intersections of all these particular discrete narratives.
That's almost exactly, that's exactly what I was sort of aiming for. And I think
it's almost also writing a negative space, right?
Yeah. The nature of, I think, with a lot of writing is that you create more than you put on the page. Even with linear writing, even with just a plain novel set in some sort of fictional world, you're going to work out more of the novel than is actually shown on the page, because this allows the things to be kind of consistent around the edges. It avoids you running headlong into really dumb contradictions later down the road. So the same is true of any one chapter of these. Is I write one chapter and like, there's a lot to that chapter that I didn't bother to put in there. I worked it out. I've got it in my notes, and some of those notes came up in later chapters, but other parts of it I intentionally didn't work out until later when I needed to.
Part of the mystique of the world building is like, how much of it do you put on the page? How much of it is the 3 weeks you spent figuring out that one thing to make that one line in the book that nobody's going to appreciate right now, but you will. And every time you read it, you're like, I got it right. And then everybody else is like, oh, okay, that was cool, I guess. But the response is out of context based on, what it took to get there in the first place.
Yes, a lot of my writing process is going like, okay, well, this person gets thrown out of a window. What kind of window? 2.5 hours on Wikipedia learning how the history of defenestration and assassination and how sash windows are constructed. And I get to the end of it, go, well, that was very informative. But the answer is, yes, I can have this person get thrown out of this window. That's okay. All I've learned is I can write 6 more words. Was that a constructive use of time? Maybe. But yes. But the other thing is, for this particular story, because each chapter can kind of be read out of context, because the characters in the story are also grappling with that exact same problem. They're coming into a situation with no memory of the scene, the chapter before, or idea of what the chapter after might be, and they make the best guess they can given what they know. And to a certain extent, you as the reader, you also don't know whether they're making a good guess or not. But also to a certain extent, you've seen the flash forward or the flashback, and you have some dramatic irony there because you know where they're going, or you have an inkling of whether this is going to work or not.
Exactly.
So that, by the way, it's a complete coincidence that thematically this serves the serial format, but it did serve it really well.
But it's sorry, I will let you talk in a moment.
Fine,
I'm talking now.
fine.
But it is part of. I love it when the prose and the genre and the format are all self-reinforcing like that, because I think it intensifies the immersion of the experience, and engaging with prose is already, metatext theory, and you bring as much to the story as any person can when they interact with the text. So the final product of the experience is a sum of what the reader brings and what the author brings. But when all of those things are so, Swiss watch lined up, it really intensifies, and I think maybe reinforces the creator's vision in a way, because it is, that funnel is so much steeper. You're having the experience of having to fill some of the gaps yourself, and that being an experience the character is having, and so you're having it through their eyes and also experiencing it at the same time. It just intensifies things, which I really love.
Thank you.
It's very cool.
At least partially intentional.
Style it out. Yes, I totally meant to do that. Yes, for sure. I love that.
The point I was going to make actually speaks directly to that, to your earlier point about how each chapter stands alone. And I think that leads to some really very powerful resonance that just kind of runs up and down the text. The chapter where Adam, where someone breaks into Wheeler's house, and by the end of it, you realize it's Adam, and she has excised him from her life. That is a fantastic short story in its own right. But not just that story, but the shape of the wound that is left in Adam's head becomes such a defining part of the second half of the book because of that structure. Because you feel the compartmentalization he does. And that's fiercely smart.
And just now sitting here thinking about it and you reminding us about that early chapter, my brain is like, so where does that fit? Was that it had to have been after the barbecue, but it feels almost like I want to know how much of a gap it was. And it had to have been years, but it felt really raw. Again, because of that kind of disconstructed narrative element of things.
Yeah, generally, when I've written 6 chapters and I'm trying to figure out the 7th chapter, what I'm looking for is like, okay, what is the next logical story beat? Here's a different analogy, different from landing on the moon. It's like trying to cross a big lake. There's a bunch of stepping stones, and at any given point, there are 3 or 4 other stepping stones that I could step to. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, which would be the most dramatic one to step to? What's the most dramatic piece of information to reveal next? And one of them would, I got to the point right before the chapter you just mentioned, Alasdair, where I went, okay, well, the next thing to do would be to explain what happened to her husband. That would be the obvious next thing to go for. So I went there. And then what's next after that? Well, actually, the middle of that chapter was supposed to be a flashback, and then that flashback grew so large. I went, okay, this flashback is now the next chapter instead. Because the two of them can be read in isolation, in theory.
Yes, they can. Yeah.
So I just split them into 2 chapters, and that worked.
Is that the chapter where she's going to find the old leader of the organization, and he gets
So the first chapter is Where Have You Been All My Life, which is when Adam Wheeler discovers that his wife's memory has been erased off him. And the chapter after that is Fresh Hell, which is how they originally met, which is when they find a monster who...
The X-Files reference on the roof, yes.
Yes, it gets a little bit X-Files.
The world's most profoundly terrifying meat cute.
Yeah, literally MEAT.
Oh, dearie me. You got there a second before I did. I was going to say that. Yeah. No, it's gross.
Love a graphic meets cute.
So I'll tell you another thing. So that particular SCP, the one which is horror alert, there's a bunch of disembodied fingers all colonizing a hospital ward. That particular SCP is a good monster for like an episode of the X-Files or for this chapter of the story. For the SCP wiki itself, probably wouldn't work that well because you just write it down and you'd read it and you go, well, this is just a bunch of fingers. There isn't much of a story here, which is something I felt able to do in this story because SCPs should stand alone and an SCP should have a narrative through line to it, like in its own right, But some of the SCPs in my story are not, don't have that function. They have a different narrative function, which is to put my character, to provide an inciting backdrop for my characters to meet one another.
And that's a whole nother aspect of this is like a genre, right? Because probably my first, I would say, like contemporaneous exposure to SCP creepypasta general concept stuff is, or at least the one that sticks out in my head most, is Control, the video game.
Have you played that?
Yes, okay, I've watched him play it all the way through.
Right.
How about that?
Good.
So, and, we are both horror fiction, genre fiction background people. So we came into something that looked kind of creepy and a little weird with, ooh, where's the Ooga Booga, where's the scary monster kind of aspect of it. And it's so interesting to me that there's like a hair's breadth between contemporary creepypasta representations like Control or Antimemetics and horror, but that they're on the almost the non-graphic side of the line, the non-creaturey, horribly side of the way. It's that concept of horror that you like so much, which is your imagination will always fill in a scarier monster than anything we could actually put on the screen.
Oh yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up because Control is a very important game to me. It's one I played, like 100%ed it, and I actually have an essay on the game Control from my perspective as someone who's written a lot for the SCP wiki, which I'm going to link in your chat now.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I'm totally opening that up right now.
One of the things I'm going to call out there is like Control and SCP and the X-Files and what just happened?
You're all good. I fixed it. I opened the tab in the wrong browser window. We're good.
Control and SCP and the X-Files and let's say Warehouse 13 and Men in Black all kind of have a very similar common core, which is it's a paranormal procedural. There are werewolves and monsters that bump in the night and someone bumps back.
But it's also serial in that it is mystery of the week, episodic, nothing changes, maintain the status quo. Exactly.
But the key difference between all of these is what the purpose that the monster serves. So in a game like Control, each new anomaly, it needs to be some kind of game mechanic or challenge or puzzle or boss or enemy. In something like the X-Files, it needs to be a monster of the week. In Men in Black, it needs to be the alien of the week. In SCP, well, it can be pretty much anything, but it needs to work as a piece of text, like as a standalone document, and it's written. I mean, there are visual elements you can do in the SCP wiki, but all of these purposes are different things that you can take, like in the paranormal. You can take a paranormal phenomenon, and these are different narrative functions. So a monster that works really well as like a D&D monster or as an X-Files monster doesn't work on the SCP wiki. And or might not, and a lot of the monsters in Control wouldn't work as SCPs at all.
Because
a lot of what I've written doesn't work in a visual format because they're so cerebral. It's all mental and abstract.
Right. It's medium dependent for some of the experiential elements. It's interesting that you talk about that because one of my favorite growing trends on TikTok, at least as far as our TikTok is concerned, is SCP and creepypasta. It's people trying to do short-form visual engagement with some of these longer-standing either graphic fine art things, Siren Head's a classic example, or prose-driven examples of creepypasta experiments. And I think video games have really hit that middle ground sweet spot because they have interactive elements, they have textual elements, they have three-dimensional interactivity in a way that can play with a lot more of those elements. I mean, Control is one of the best video games in the entire world, as far as I'm concerned. It was so good. The heavy metal level where you put your headphones on will live forever in infamy. It is so good. I loved it so much. Yeah. After finally making my way through that damn maze. But there's just a way that the transmission of the transmission medium really plays an effect on things like this. Because you look at movies like Pontypool, one of his all-time favorites, which is again about mimetic transference and how the visual elements and the auditory elements of that work in a film.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. And the thing is, from a writer, from my perspective, at the back end of, of trying to create for these media, like the medium itself informs all kinds of decisions in terms of what I'm going to put down there. I wrote this book to be like text, there's a lot of it that doesn't, there are a lot of semi-licit adaptations of SCPs, on YouTube and stuff like this. And some of them work. And some of them are anti-memetics related, and in my view, a lot of them don't really work. Like as a reading, that works great. That's just that's just straight narration. That works quite well. But I think actually you found a couple of times there's some screwy formatting in this, which doesn't really read out very well. That's because I'm thinking text first, and I'm thinking about you guys. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
It doesn't, someone in chat saying they could not do SCP-3125 as a TikTok. I think it's been tried, but no, they couldn't. It doesn't work. It just doesn't have that aspect.
Or I think it could, but what it would have to do in a visual and in an auditory format is push that one kind of boundary that auditory and visual formats don't do well, and which the human psyche really rebels against, and that is second person. The idea that you have to kind of start getting up. I'm thinking specifically about that season 5 Magnuson episode with the merry-go-round with the doctor, where it's being narrated from the perspective of you are the patient experiencing the events of the story, and how that was one of the very few 200 episodes of the Magnus Archives that made me go, ooh, nope, I don't think I can engage with this one. And it's because there's something about that second person perspective that really, again, I think it's psychologically designed to get our hackles up, because it is telling us through our senses what we are experiencing, even though we are not experiencing it.
Yes. I've never written in second person.
I was going to ask you that.
Writing in second person is it's actually a really difficult thing to do. First person is very popular. Third person is what I do most of the time. Let me ask you this. Did you notice that this entire thing was written in the present tense?
Yeah,
I did. And I it's one of the things I caught when I got about a third of the way through and went, wait, no, I need to start over. And I was like, these are flashbacks. I know that from my brain is stitching together a narrative timeline perspective, but the tensing is all in the moment. Yeah.
I've been writing in present tense for basically forever. All my novels are in the present tense. That's because one of my influences is comic books. Or comic books with narration, particularly Grant Morrison's JLA from the 1990s.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, which is ridiculously fast-paced, widescreen kind of, you read it and you go, oh, now I see why a lot of people like the Justice League. It's because these are the most gigantic threats. They're solving 200 of them in a single issue. It's just nuts. But it's all narrated first person. And I like that immediacy, and I like putting you in the moment, and it doesn't feel like, it feels like the future is a little harder to grasp, a little harder to see. Because when you write in the past tense, you're like, well, obviously there is a future of some kind. But if you write in the present tense, like the future is a little more uncertain. It feels like it's real.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like writing in the present tense.
Capitalism is asserting itself. So we are going to take a little 2-minute break here, folks. And when we come back, I want to pick up on this point about first person perspective and what it changes about like the perceived threat profile
Yes.
of the narrative as well, because you brought up comic books as an example. And I think you are, as a reader, in a very different emotional space, maybe when you're engaging with a first person narrative versus a third person narrative or a past tense narrative specifically. Cool. So we'll be right back, everybody. Get up and get yourselves a wiggle. We will let capitalism do its thing, and we will continue this glorious conversation. We'll be right back.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we're back.
And we're back. We were talking about the typographical representation of the novel in different formats and how the Kindle version that I was reading off of had them as squares, and Alasdair's version, which I think was just a PDF or something, or maybe even from the website, I'm not sure, was showing them differently. Okay, so I wanted to go back to this point we were talking about right before the break, that you mentioned JLA comics were one of your big influences, and writing in present tense. And the point I wanted to ask you about is, like, I find that when I'm engaging with a present tense narrative, the emotional stakes are higher, because when you talk to some extent in past tense, some part in the back of my brain goes, well, this has already happened and somebody lived to tell the tale. So the threat isn't necessarily the same level. And is that an intentional choice, or is it just, has it been a stylistic choice that you find it easier to write that way?
It was an intentional choice, but it was an intentional choice from a long time ago. So my first novel, well, the thing is, I've been writing for a long time, but I didn't start writing for the web until some years ago. But my first novel, which is called Ed, which I feel like my novels have been getting slowly better over time, was originally written on a site called Everything 2, and it was written in the form of like diary entries, like phony diary entries. So like, here's what I did today. Today, Ed and I did this. Today, Ed and I did that. And it was written kind of in the present tense because that was the logical voice to be writing in. And I just kind of kept writing in that tense because it just sort of worked. And I felt that I was something that I was reasonably adept at. And also it's something that most people don't. I mean, not in prose, at least. But the other aspect of it is I really like writing action sequences. And there is nothing better for an action sequence than present tense.
Yeah.
I say that I write really slowly. Are we dropping behind on the auto captioning?
I think so. That's what I'm taking a second to do.
Should I stop speaking for a moment, or let you?
I'm not quite sure what's going on. It seems to be
What is it? Is it captioning the future?
I mean, it could be. It seems to be capturing me at the moment, but not you. So I was thinking, why don't you go ahead and talk for a second, and let's see if it catches back up.
I write really slowly, but action sequences in particular take me even longer than ever because I edit like crazy. It's like, I feel like it's similar to what happens when you're in a film editing room and you're editing a real action sequences, because it's all about pacing. And you were talking earlier about how some people just devour a book super fast. But if you assume that a human being, a reader, reads at a roughly fixed rate of words per minute,
150 to 165.
Sure, very good. I didn't know that. I was not aware
I do.
but thank you. Great. But
that's how we calculate total story length for the podcast narrations.
Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's about between 50 and 165.
Cool. But that means that you can spend 165 words talking about 1 second of action, or you can spend 165 words talking about a minute of action. And depending on how long a word you pick or how long a sentence you choose to use, every sentence break is like a cut. Every paragraph break is a cut. It's all editing. I going backwards and backwards and backwards and over and over and over again, saying, does this flow properly? Is like geometrically, is it obvious where everything is in space and what's happening? And I love just editing action down so that I can get it really crisp and effective, so that I can communicate precisely what's happening as clearly as possible using exactly the right pacing, so that fast things happen in a small number of words and slow things happen over a long number of words and stuff like this. But present tense is perfect for action. It's great.
Nice.
It's really interesting that you say that, because that's a technique I've seen start to spread out quite fast. And kind of from a visual point of view in kind of two different ways. What you're talking about feels a lot to me like the prose equivalent of the way the John Wick movies do action, in that it's given space so you can understand what's going on, but at the same time, that space is keyed very closely to speed of action and speed of response. And
there is a crispness to it, which...
Exactly.
I mean, it speaks both to like the tight nature of the planning, but it also speaks to character, I think. For example, Marion is the sort of person who goes into a fight like John Wick. She knows exactly what she wants to accomplish with a minimum of risk and a maximum of effect. And so that like narrative style contributes and keeps you immersed in that sense of character. And I think I found later on, like, it was kind of a pivot point. It wasn't so much that Adam was describing action sequences, but Adam was describing the travel and the environmental impact and how that had a very different, like, mindset about how, he was very caught up in this is wrong and I just have to do it, where, he's having a very experiential processing situation, whereas Marion's like, I want to get this done and this thing's weak here and I can hit it like this, and if I miss I have to do that.
Adam's very good at not dying.
Not even intentionally. You get the impression.
So you just hit a bunch of things, and I want to address, not address, but I want to respond to as many of them as I can remember.
Do.
In terms of John Wick, so I mean, there is a case to be made that a long single take, of which there are many in the John Wick movies, a long single take is kind of like a run-on sentence in the terms of like, as time goes on, the tension builds. Is like, where is this ending? Where is this ending? Eventually, it cuts, but then there's another cut. You're right that some movies don't have very good action because you don't get a sense of the geometry, because of the way the camera is placed and the way the cuts are positioned. Like, you can't actually tell what's happening.
Yeah.
I think there's at least one of the Nolan Batman films which has a real problem with that kind of thing, where it's just kind of a blur. And on the one hand, yeah, that's an intentional creative choice because fighting Batman is supposed to be extremely confusing. But on the other hand, it does feel like something of an error compared to something like Mad Max Fury Road, which deliberately always puts the action in the middle of the shot, so that your eye doesn't have to move around all that much. So that is also true. I think it's very important to communicate clearly what's happening in the action. Another thing you mentioned was like action reveals character. The way people behave in an action sequence, but also just in generic narrative, but also in movies is, and there, I actually find this quite problematic sometimes, is that you have an action sequence just for the sake of the action. But action should reveal character. Like a story beat should be hit over the course of this fight, right? We should discover something that someone can do or can't do, or that they want to do or they don't want to do. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but the fight should serve a purpose.
My favorite example of this is in one of the later episodes of the She-Hulk TV show. There's a fight where Jen is meeting Daredevil, and they are both involved in the fight. And he does this ridiculous acrobatic get down to the floor thing, and she just jumps and lands. And there's so much communicated in that little tiny beat of mindset and threat profile and experience level. It was just very neatly done that I think it speaks to that example.
Absolutely. Well, another thing is, so believe it or not, there's like Marion Wheeler, yes, is very calculating. I think you and I actually already aware of this, but I have written some SCP Control crossover fan fiction.
Oh no, it's going on our list of next things to read.
It's going on the list. Good. Like, let me know when you get around to that. But I wanted to write that because I wanted to just write some action sequences with Marion, and she does more fighting in that than she does in the book that we're talking about right now. But we go into more detail about exactly how Marion Wheeler fights. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm going to quote a line here, is that for Marion Wheeler, combat is nearly always combat with a physically superior opponent. She's not that tall, and she doesn't have superpowers. She's very well trained, but for her, combat is primarily about avoiding combat. So she's going to, like, if she can win, she's going to win pretty fast. If she can't, she's going to run away, hide, improvise, cheat. And you do see that happen. And there's no such thing as cheating when you are vastly outgassed. Maybe I cheated, but only one of us is alive. So,
right.
Yeah, precisely. Them's the breaks.
They become gimmick fights, almost like puzzle fights. Like, my objective is not physical confrontation. It is to accomplish something that's going to put me in a better position, whether that's, casting the spell or getting the hell away. It doesn't matter what that thing is.
She's got an objective. Compare with Adam Wheeler, who is not a fighter. Like, he would go, like, at one point during this book in ANTIMEMETICS, he acquires a gun, and he doesn't know what to do with the gun. He can point it and fire it, but he's like, this is a liability. I'm going to blow my own foot off. And he's scared of his own weapon, because the nature of his life is that he's never really had to fight.
But he has that assumption that he knows he's in a physically threatened position, and this is what his own experience has told him should be a tool for his own safety. But he's also, critical and knowledgeable of enough of himself to say, I do not have the skills, and this is more of a liability than an advantage.
He hasn't been trained.
His exhausted, permanently traumatized pragmatism is just so good. That moment in particular with the gun, I got this really clear mental image of him just looking at it the way, like, and it's almost Peter Capaldi-like way of, what am I doing? And it speaks to your point of how action speaks to character. And the fact that he knows himself so well, and he knows what he's capable of and what he isn't, resonates very strongly with his job as a professional survivor in the back half of the story.
Yeah.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention about acting with the character. When I'm narrating, like when I'm writing the actions of one character or the other, my narration starts to sometimes look like that character's internal monologue almost. When I'm narrating Marion moving, then I'm going to narrate that in one way. When I'm narrating Adam moving, I'm going to narrate that in a different way because his thought processes are different, the things he's dwelling on and talking and looking at. But like, this is omniscient third person. But the omniscient third person will start using particular phrases that perhaps Marion wouldn't.
But that's exactly the reason, I think that in particular is exactly the reason why we were drawn to narrate this, is because we work in audio fiction. And the secret sauce of audio fiction is communicating character in prose in a way that is enhanced by performance. And those, it's vocabulary choices, it's pacing, it's worldview, it's the perception and the description of the same events through two different pairs of eyes makes for compelling audio presentation. And so that is very much a feature. That and it's scary as hell, and this audience loves scary as hell things, is why we went, oh yeah, that one's a winner. We definitely need to perform that one. So thank you very much, by the way, for letting us do so. This has been delightful.
My pleasure.
Terrifying, but delightful. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah,
I will be here forever if we just keep going.
I've got all the time in the world. I can keep going if you want.
Yeah, that's true.
I am completely fascinated by the element of, by the way that the structure you use and the typographical tricks that you employ mean that the book itself becomes an extrusion of 3125. And
I loved that sigh. That was good. That was very good.
That is, I think you may be one of a very small amount of people who crack the code of how to do 21st century cosmic horror. Because that subversion of format and that use of format as narrative delivery system is incredibly difficult to do. And it's even harder to do in a way that looks very logical and simple.
And not like artifice or shtick.
Precisely.
Right?
And I wanted to circle back around to something I think you mentioned in chat a couple of weeks back, which was the section where Adam is overtaken by 3125. You get little pieces of the prose. And how that, from my perspective, felt like that is him clawing his way back to the surface for a second and then being dragged back under. How you said you'd actually written that paragraph.
Oh, and I won't. I
story.
do and do not want to read it, right?
Okay. So again, like you hit a bunch of really interesting stuff. So first of all, like the use of redaction specifically, and so the use of like CIA style
black bars,
documents, like that's normal. This is a thing that once you're floating around the SCP wiki for a while, this just becomes normal. You use redaction. Sometimes you write text saying data expunged, and sometimes you use the black bars. But I used like the black bars because that was the logical place to go, because it can be used as a symbol as well. And because I can fool around with that, I can redact large chunks of text and have a particular effect. It's one of these things. This is what I've said this. I said this in one or two other places, but something that's very normal for you as a sort of small subculture of creators might be a novel new taste outside of your subculture. Something like this use of redaction here is just, it just kind of came fairly naturally to me because this is just how we write on the SCP wiki. But outside of the wiki, people are like, that's neat. I haven't seen that before.
Girl on the train when all of a sudden the world realized what an unreliable narrator was. And those of us in prose have been there forever, right?
Yes, indeed. What else was I going to say? Yes, so this bit that's completely redacted, one of the deleted scenes bonus features on my website is the non-redacted version of this. And this does, in fact, merit a content warning. It's very violent. Read with care. If you're not up for it, like, you're going to get half a paragraph into this and you go, ooh, this maybe isn't for me. But maybe it is. It's up to you. but consider yourself warned.
I am still
there is
very
no warning at the top of the thing itself saying like this is the most violent thing in SCP.
Ozzy, the movie was based on the original novel Girl on the Train, yes. And the big reveal that had everybody all like, oh, this is so innovative, was an unreliable narrator, which people who read genre fiction have been aware of unreliable narrators for ever.
The overwhelming response was, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club. Here, I got a stack of recommendations. Start here, right? Exactly.
So, but the thing is, like, HTML is my bread and butter as well. So anytime I'm doing fixed width text or just playing with the text sizes or the alignments, like it's a very small thing, but it's a thing that you can do very easily on the wiki, and which I think is relatively rarely seen in prose fiction.
Yeah, we're getting into kind of like the House of Leaves territory, where the physical representation and presentation of the text also contributes to the narrative in a way.
But lastly, I think that having the thing have a symbol, which is this gigantic tombstone symbol, and then having you turn the page and there it is, occupying the entire page.
I think I would have screamed and thrown the book if that had been the case.
I think in book form it works better, but it does work pretty well, I think, on the web as well, where you just scroll down, there it is. There's a bunch of jump scary stuff that you can do on the SCP Wiki, which is completely impractical in text, in print.
But all this is making me think now is, when are we going to get like a fantastic hardcover illustrated version of this? Like, can you imagine this is a comic?
Oh my goodness.
It could be done. However, I mean, that's a serious adaptation, right?
Right.
The nature of comics is like a comic is always a collaboration. Well, it's nearly always a collaboration between like a writer and one or more artists.
Exactly.
The visual component of this story, I think it does have some visual components, but it would need much more in terms of visual components. Like there would need to be some creation done, some serious changes would need to be overhauled.
And of course, the downside of that is you lose what the reader brings to the experience element of it in a universal fashion. And like my favorite example for this is, I both do and do not hope there was ever a Mass Effect movie, because I love the Mass Effect video games very much. But in order to do that sort of transcribed presentation, you have to make canonical linear decisions, which will exclude the original experience of a lot of people's playthroughs of the game. Another example that I'm really looking forward to seeing how this works is Stephen Colbert is going to be producing a new television series based on the Roger Zelazny Princes of Amber books, which were my very first introduction to genre fiction, one of my very first ones. And there's been a comic book, and there's been a couple of other attempts to kind of take this enormous liminal world and transcribe it into a physical visual medium that I'm both like fascinated and terrified by. Kind of like I'm sure all the Robert Jordan fans were about the Wheel of Time TV show. It's like, how was that adaptation going to take not only a gigantic world and a lot of characters, but the like almost meta level of experience of its fans around it, and then push that down into the visual form. There's just so much that by definition has to be lost. But then again, you could have a Witcher situation where a lot was gained as well from the stylistic choices that were made and how the narrative was presented and altered to be in a television show, as opposed to the very Slavic novels, very different presentation style.
Yeah, there's always, like, when any medium shift like that, it's always a really dicey value proposition. There's always a lot that simply will not transfer over. I discovered stuff that wouldn't transfer over. I mean, on the SCP Wiki itself, here's a good example. On the SCP Wiki itself, if you go to the entry for SCP-3125, unlike in the book, when you start reading it, there's just a bunch of text, and then there's a keypad. And that's it. It says end of file, and then there's a keypad. And unless you know the code, you can't read the rest of that. But the code is extremely easy to figure out. or if you ask me or Google online, or it's actually hidden on the page very obviously, where you go, oh, there's the code right there, and you just enter it, and that's the code. But that interactive element, I couldn't do that in print.
Right.
Obviously, I couldn't put that in the ebook form. So obviously, a little is always lost.
But then we had, what was it called? Bandersnatch?
The Black Mirror interactive movie. Yeah.
More interactive movie. So, I mean, we're starting to edge up to that creepy Fahrenheit 451 writing you into the serial on the 3 walls of your television scenario, where you do have that what mechanisms are being developed for the interactivity of fiction. But of course, then there are limits to that, because you've got to produce all the various options, and then studios start doing nasty AI things, and we have to say no. And yeah, we're not quite there yet, but it's very fascinating how we're getting there.
So there is a lot to be lost, and there's a lot to be gained, and you've got to make sure that the trade-off is worth it, I think, in any adaptation.
Yeah,
that's the deal.
Very much so. I think this might be a good chance for our chat to start thinking about if they have some questions. We have one from before that we'll get started with, I think, and then we'll give the moderators some time to collect a couple questions. So one of the things that's been asked in previous streams about this book in particular are the difficulties and the opportunities for creating in a shared universe, and such a big one as the phenomenon that is SCP. Like, how did you always know, look, I want to write in this world, or were you involved with it in an earlier format that quite literally SCP has been formulated around some of your work?
It has. Right. Okay. So let me give you the executive summary of how this works. So the SCP Wiki started around 2007, 2008. In the very, very early days, this would have been July 2008, I wrote a very early first series SCP, SCP-055. That's the one that's the self-keeping secret. That's the very first chapter of the book. It's the prologue of the book. I wrote that because I was reading the existing SCPs, of which there were probably only a few hundred at the time, which is hard to believe now, but there were only a few hundred of them at the time. And I looked at them and I went, okay, there are no mimetic SCPs. There are no SCPs that are like massive contagious ideas, or like are figurative or conceptual. So I went, okay, what would a mimetic SCP look like? And I came up with SCP-055. And that was it. So that was, I think I coined the term antimemetics in there somewhere, or I might have done, I don't know. And then I put that in there because at the time, the SCP Wiki was literally a wiki. It was a media wiki installation, and people would routinely edit other people's entries. That was it didn't really have a lot of structure to it. So I wrote the first half of SCP-055, and if you look at the article as it is currently, the second half of it is by someone else. It doesn't say it's by someone else, but it is. It's by Captain Bellman, I think is that person's username, and they are long since missing. I don't know who they are. I've never spoken with them personally. But partially because of that, only my half of it is what actually goes into the Kindle edition and the print editions, because I was not able to contact this other person and secure that permission. And yeah, so I only put my half of that in there. But I wrote that and then left the wiki for several years and worked on several other things. I wrote another book and a half, I think. I wrote my book, Ra would have been at that time, which took several years. And then, but all that in most of that time, like I still had this idea kicking around. It's like, yeah, anti-memes. There's more here. There's more here. 2015, I came back and started writing antimemetics. Like I wrote one chapter. You came back
and you're like, what is all of this? Oh my god! It's like throwing 2 wire coat hangers in a closet and shutting the door.
Yeah, it was a completely different thing. I had to go, hey, can I re-register, please? Because you've moved site now. You're on a completely different installation. Yes, I am an old user. Can you grandfather me in? But so I was kind of familiar with the SCP Wiki from a very early time in the wiki's existence. But basically, I view it as a kind of a platform. One of the most useful things about this is that explicitly there is no canon on the SCP Wiki. It's okay to directly contradict someone else's SCP, which is a good thing because there are 7,000 of them now, and you can't be expected to read them all and keep them straight. That would be insane. So as long as you understand the basics, you can just kind of build on top of that. And those basics are very familiar. They're very X-Files, as we've mentioned. It's like very much like Control. Like, yeah, you can handle those basics very easily. So yes, that is what happened. And I spent several years writing ANTIMEMETICS in 2 large parts. Like part 1, the first half of the book, I wanted to do that in I wanted to tell a complete story in 1 year. So I took most of 2015. I spent writing that. And then I went back away and went, yeah, I can do a second half of this. And I wrote that second half over the course of another 2.5 years. I think it is. Horrifying amount of time. No, longer, much longer.
Don't do math like that. It starts to get scary.
I write really slowly. I write slower than most people. But yes.
All right. Another question we've got from the chat. What is an SCP that you would have loved or have wanted to put into ANTIMEMETICS but didn't? So I'm guessing 055 was one of them. But
the second half of, actually, I'm kind of okay with leaving the second half off. But the thing is, for the book, I wanted it to be entirely my own creation, mostly. Mm-hmm. There are references to other SCPs. So, for example, SCP-1425 is referenced pretty heavily. That was huge inspiration on all of this, actually. And if you go to the web, you go to the wiki, you go to the ANTIMEMETICS Division hub, you will find many other items of precursor work that are very similar or were inspirational to me. Mm-hmm. Let me have a look here. Oh, so there's one called SCP-2828, which is actually quite interesting. Should I say what that was about?
I think it'll be fine since we're talking about Wikipedia entry SCPs, I think it'd be fine if we talked about it.
There's a very famous one, I think it was SCP-2521, which you would have a really hard time narrating because it's purely pictorial. There are no words. It was originally created for a kind of a brevity competition. So this person won the brevity competition by virtue of having 0 words or pictures. But It is an SCP which, if documented or spoken about, comes and gets you. So it has to be documented entirely pictorially. And I thought it would be very interesting to use that to escape from somewhere. Be like, well, you think I've locked in this jail cell, but here is a detailed verbal description of SCP-142521, and it comes and gets you and you disappear. Now, where you are now is something of a question. And the thing is, this is someone else's SCP, and I didn't want to just tread on their toes, and it's a very well-regarded SCP. I didn't want to bend it in a way that I wanted to bend it. I wanted to leave it to be there on that person's property. So yeah,
I love it, and I love the idea. I'm thinking about it in terms of one of my favorite all-time comic books ones, which was the Pizza Dog point of view episode of Hawkeye, which is told in. Yes. Oh, and it's in the entire comic is from the dog's point of view, and it is all pictograms. That's how the dog communicates, and there was a recent shark one.
Jeff the Shark
did a similar thing where I think it was with a space dog. Was it? I can't remember who the shark was with, but there was someone else he was communicating with in images.
It's a group of kittens who he scares off the back of the fish shop and then feels bad about it and shares his fish with the kittens.
I see. But again, that was the first time I ever encountered how the dog thinks he identifies a particular location by the combination of the trash can and the pizza next door and the oil from the slick and things like that. But that kind of pictographic language is what this SCP you were just talking about reminds me of.
Yes, very much so.
Really cool. All right, we've got a question from Grim. How do you feel when you see now other SCP creators building on or using your story and your original? For example, 6820, Alute makes a reference to 3125.
I have no problem with that at all. That is part of the contract, as it were. That's contract in scare quotes, obviously. When you engage with the wiki, you are building on other people's work, and other people are going to build on your work. There are things in the wiki, like I mentioned, 1425, which gets kind of referenced offhand a couple of times during the story. So yeah, that's completely fine. I don't have a lot of input into those continuations. From my perspective, ANTIMEMETICS, it was designed as and is a completed story. Mm-hmm. The narrative is concluded.
but so much more is implied. Anyway, okay.
The more is implied, but not there isn't. And the more story isn't necessarily implied.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's more like world elements is implied.
Yeah. So I'm okay with people taking this in different directions as long as they do well with it.
That's very cool. We have a lot of writers in the chat, like I said, and one of them has asked if you have any general advice for somebody who is in the process of developing their craft with writing work like this or speculative in nature.
Yes, I do. You go to my author page on the SCP Wiki, scroll down, you will find a section called Quantum's One Weird Tip for Writing. Now, I don't know what level of experience you're at this point, but if you're just getting started, then the most important thing is to finish work.
Yeah.
Don't write chapter 1 of a novel, write a short story that's 1 chapter long. And because it's important to get to the end. Starting things doesn't count. You've got to get to the end. And it's okay for a story to be short. Like, word count is a fake idea. Like, if the best you can manage is a haiku, like, that's okay. A haiku is a complete work, but you've got to complete your work because that's the only way you can practice endings, and that's the only way you can have proper discipline.
Yeah.
So good luck.
100%.
Nice. Thank you very much.
If you get halfway through something and you give up, that's great. Write another story that's half as long.
Yeah. No, you are talking to two of the biggest advocates for short stories as the perfect form, because you write all the major beats of a complete narrative, and you do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again.
It's so easy to spend a month or a year of your life writing 1,200 story beats or 15 perfect planned story beats, and then write 1 chapter and then stop. And that was a waste of everybody's time. So what you do is find 1 beat. What's the best, most important beat? Write that. Put that in 1 chapter. What's the most important moment in your character's history? Just put that in there by itself. And if that works, there may be demand for chapter 2, and then write chapter 2. And if that works, write chapter 3.
Fantastic. Let's see. Speaking of endings, do you always write with a particular ending in mind, or are you discovering the ending as you go? Are you a planner or are you a pantser?
Kind of half between the two. I generally have an approximate sort of message / approximate landing site in mind, but exactly where it's going to go. I find that changes over time, As I say, it is an arc, and you have more and more control over the flight, but sometimes things happen and you go, oh, well, I guess we're aiming towards a different thing. A good example of this would be probably about 2/3 of the way through ANTIMEMETICS. I had to decide, right, is this going to be a happy ending or a sad ending? Because I could have chosen to end it either way. And I went, it's going to be a happy ending, because I ended the first half of the story on a real downer note. And I decided, right, okay, let's have an upbeat ending. And that shaped various decisions that were made over the back half of the book.
By the time I got halfway through the book, I was like, oh God, how is this going to end? I was so braced.
It is kind of a downer ending, honestly.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm going to assume that everyone here has read the book, but like nearly everybody ends up dead. It's a happy ending, but a lot of people are dead.
I don't even know if you can classify it as happy. There is a successful conclusion to the events. Yeah.
And then a kind of a Flash Gordon style question mark.
Yeah. That's going to stick with me, right? It's not quite a or did I, but there is a sort of, and now the world will never be the same kind of situation.
But also, like, reflecting on the end, like the final chapter is the epilogue is 058 going, this has happened at least once, at least twice before, and we quote unquote won. Is it going to happen again? Probably. Is it going to keep happening over and over forever? Maybe. What do we need to change so that it never happens again? And he doesn't know what to change so that it never, ever, ever happens again. It might be 100 years, it might be 1,000 years, but it's going to happen again. He thinks.
Yeah.
It's one of the lines in there that haunts me is that the line 058 has about, is this where we need to be?
Yeah.
How far are we from it if it isn't? And that is so nuanced and so subtle, because you're right. It is that kind of Ray,
I think maybe
kind of B.
kind of, yeah, exactly.
And it's so interesting that 058 has those two scenes in which he is so radically different. That he has the kind of very chipper, very kind of determined, congratulations, Bart, this is the rest of your life moment. And then how his arc is so completely sketched out with that interaction and with the final moment. And you can see how he's changed and how the
And he doesn't know why.
And he doesn't know why, but he knows it's there.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely the best kind of haunting. That's really good.
Thank you so much for calling out that one line, because that is one of my favorite lines in the entire thing. It is very important to me. In part, it is, so the nature of the SCP Wiki is that there are long ongoing discussions within the community, like, what is the Foundation? Is the Foundation a good thing or a bad thing? Are they evil? Are they cold but cruel? Are they an unambiguous force for good? Yes, no. And there are, because as we say, there is no canon. It's fine that everybody has different perspectives on this and writes stories with different perspectives. So in part, that line is just kind of turning to camera and going, how do we want to write the Foundation? Like, should it be a force for good or evil or not?
It makes it a question, which I think is really powerful.
Thank you. My feeling personally, as a creator, I'll share this, is that the Foundation, firstly, it's a large enough entity that it may contain multitudes. There are going to be arms of the organization that are trying to do a good job and protect people. And there are arms which are mostly there for self-preservation, because they want to make sure that the Foundation continues to exist. Not humanity, just their part of the Foundation. And there are arms which are doing actively evil things, which the other arms perhaps would prefer them not to be. And maybe there are internal disagreements about this, really dangerous ones. Some idea that I pitched some time ago, which I don't think anyone's ever going to snap up, is like, there could be a Foundation internal civil war. It could fragment into two Foundations with radically different perspectives on what should be done about anomalous stuff.
And turning all of that various technology on itself.
Perhaps. Yeah. A lot of that could be really messy. I would need to think more about what that would give us narratively, though. But it is definitely talking about, like, if we're in control of the world, like, we're obviously not doing a good enough job. So what needs to change?
I'm remembering that discussion we had a couple weeks ago about the idea of the SCP HR department and how they keep becoming aware of candidates that would be qualified for them, but then they disappear, not realizing that there are competing recruiting agencies going after the same pool of candidates. And
was that a story you read or just a pitch you had?
No, it was just an idea we had.
That's a really strong idea. You should. I'll communicate that to the community.
You know, the idea that somebody's trying to investigate, where are all the qualified people for these roles? We know they must exist, and if they don't exist, that means shadow versions of our own organization must be recruiting them, and why, and to what end?
Someone mentioned, actually, I've got a better answer to a question someone answered earlier. It's like, is there SCPs that you wanted to include but couldn't? Yes. Well, this isn't an SCP, but midway while I was writing this, someone suggested that there could be something called the Counter-Conceptual Division, which would be another Antimemetics division, which is not aware of the first one.
Right.
And vice versa. And I thought that was a banger concept.
And then taking that to the HR idea.
Yeah, I really wanted to find a place to put it into this story, and I couldn't. I really wanted to, but it was going to turn out to be a massive distraction. I had an idea for ending it in this way, you know? I had a thought that maybe the Antimemetics division could completely fail, and then the Counter-Conceptual division just comes out of nowhere and says, well, we've been fighting the same problem, but we actually have a workable solution, so here it is. But that would just be like a horrible, horrible way to end the story.
It's like the Office offcut story, right? There's just one guy in a room somewhere going, where are all those files? Why do I keep seeing this? You know, it's that's such a fun idea. Capitalism is asserting itself again, so I think this might be, actually, I mean, we run almost an hour and a half, and I want to be respectful. We all need to sleep tonight. So this might be a really good time for you to tell us, like, what's your latest release, and like what is it that we should go out and read next?
Right now, before the ad break.
Let's take the ad break first. We'll just take a little short one, and then we'll come right back. So everybody, go and take yourself a stretch, get some water. You know, I'm going to need a refill as well, and we'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody.
Hello,
We're back. We saw the comment about SCP Magnus crossover, and we started talking about TikToks and how I'm sure there's got to be SCP Magnus crossover fiction already out there. If you find some, send it my way, and I will read it through my covered eyes so it doesn't scare me too badly. Right. So tell us about either what you're working on now or what's just come out and what's coming up next for you.
Further reading. Right.
Further reading. Yes.
Okay. First of all, if you enjoyed Antimemetics, go to the Antimemetics Division hub page on the wiki, scroll down a little bit. You'll find various bits of further reading by people, SCP creators other than myself. So most notably is a side story called What the Dead Know, which another SCP user started writing while I was writing Antimemetics. It kind of runs in parallel and eventually feeds back into it, and perhaps sheds some light on certain events which are perhaps a little obtuse as written, but yeah, that's worth a look. And there's other precursor work down there, including SCP-1425, which I've mentioned previously. And there's some further reading, including various things that have already kind of been mentioned. Further stories written by about Marion Wheeler that aren't necessarily by me, and further stories that are antimemetic but aren't necessarily by me. So get stuck into that. In terms of books by me, stuff by me, yes. So Antimemetics is my second to last book. My current book is called Valuable Humans in Transit and Other Stories. It's an anthology of fiction, all science fiction. It's not SCP related, but this is stories that I've written over the course of several years, going back actually quite a long way, some of them. Wow. But that includes, among other things, the short story Lena, which was extremely well received and is about uploading and what happens to the first person who gets uploaded.
Okay,
it's not pleasant. But,
I have so many tabs open right now. It's incredible.
Okay, it's all right. It's all right. Yes, so that book is for sale in all of the usual formats. You can buy you can buy an ebook. You can buy an ebook from places other than Amazon if Amazon isn't your bag. But you can also get a paperback or a hardback cover from Amazon.
I definitely want a paperback version of this.
It can be done.
Antimemetics for sure. And in fact, I may send it. Find a way to get it to you in a way that is comfortable for you, so that you can autograph.
We'll have to work on that.
Yeah.
I don't currently offer an autograph service as yet, but who can say?
Yeah, we'll figure something out. That sounds good.
Ask me again in a year. We'll see.
Sounds good.
As for what's coming next, I can't talk about that.
Yeah.
Something is coming next, but I can't talk about it. I'm sorry.
When do you think you might be able to talk about it more, so that we can
I will probably mention it on Twitter as soon as I have something concrete to talk about.
Oh, sweet.
Other than that, as I say, ask me again in a year. The nature of writing is that the thing is, I've been writing serial fiction online for a very long period of time, where a chapter ideally a chapter per month. In practice, a chapter every 4, 5, 6, 7 months would show up.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't been doing that, as people may have noticed, for some time. There is a reason for that. But the nature of writing is that it's a slow-moving kind of process. It takes a long time to write a long piece of text and then to edit it properly and so on. So that is about all I can say at this point. So
definitely make sure you find Quantum on your social of choice. The link that we have for you is your website and Twitter.
That's fine.
Given what Twitter's done, is there another platform that you think you may decamp to that people should investigate?
I am on Blue Sky.
Okay.
As quantum.org on Blue Sky. I'm not 100% convinced by Blue Sky as yet, although I will say that apparently they do give Antimemetics to their developers as recommended reading.
That's what we've heard, yeah.
Which is flattering, although I can't say I'm sure how useful that is as recommended reading if you're running a social network. It is about ideas, but it's not really about social networking or anything like that.
I am desperate to know the why behind that fact.
I think just because it's about contagious ideas and things like that. The other required reading book is Drill's book, the famous Twitter poster, perhaps you're not aware.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fine, it's very well worth reading.
You're like, I have 1 degree of separation from Drill. There we go.
That's pretty interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Blue Sky may or may not stick around, but I'm on there for now, to be continued. But honestly, Twitter might or might not stick around, so I'm on there for now. And if either or both of those go under, refer back to my website, quantum.org.
We'll start developing Psychic's social media profiles or something like that. Who knows? Thank you so much. This has been a brilliant conversation. We've had a great time. Chat, I hope you had as much fun as we did, which was an awful lot. And we could do so much more of this, but let's cut ourselves off. We're going to take another little quick break. I know we just had one, but we'll take a very short one just to be able to say goodnight to Quantum. And then we will come back with some shenanigans that may be of a slightly emotional nature. And I'm not quite sure why we just had a whole bunch of random people start following us, but I'll ask the mods to take a look at that. And then you might want to grab yourself a tissue, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Bye-bye.
Think we're back? All right. Good evening, everybody. I think we're all back. We've got a whole bunch of follow botters who've decided to show up. So our amazing moderators are on the job. Thank you very much to the moderators.
Thank you to the deployers of the Banhammers.
Thank you so much to Quantum.
Oh my god.
What a freaking interview.
That was incredible.
That was so much fun of a conversation. I know a couple folks came in a little bit later. Do check out the VOD on this one because this was a really good discussion just right from the jump. And especially if you had questions about writing and technique and stuff, we've been talking. This is rich vein of material this week for sure. That sounds great, Hawkeye. Fantastic. So, all right, hang on. What are we doing? Where are we? We're going to have a very emotional conclusion to our shenanigans. So instead of going away laughing this evening, shiny opals may make us all cry. I'm just warning you now. There's the link to the shenanigans. It does look like this evening may be the conclusion because there's 2 entries.
Okay.
Here we are. Chapter 5. Season 5. Hang on to some tissues, everybody. Here we go. All right. Hopefully everybody can hear us okay. I've moved the microphone around a little bit. Everybody's like, oh, shiny opals, if we cry, we both love and hate you. Yes. Starting afresh after a bad situation. July 7th, 2019. There are 6 chapters. There are 6 chapters! 6 chapters! Oh, there's an epilogue. Emotionally, how dare you?
Emotional damage.
Gosh, emotional damage. Today, we hear from a reader who's looking for their new normal in the aftermath of what we all experienced. As a reminder of our new comment policy, please avoid talking about any specifics of your experiences during the events of October 18th last year without using content warnings and spoiler bars. And please only do if directly relevant to the topic at hand. More general conversation is best suited to our regular open threads and our ongoing self-care threads.
So I think this is...
I think this might be me. I think this might be me narrating this. And, I'm not quite sure, but given that, I'm gonna kind of assume this is... How about this? Not John. All right, fine, then... We'll take a punt here. Dear Abigail, I've got to admit I'm not a long-time reader or anything, and I've never written in a column like this before. But it has been a monumentally strange few years. And now, while the dust is settling, I'm trying to figure out the future. I'm not sure if you'll be able to help, no offense, but I figured it can't hurt to ask. I had a safe career for a few years. Not exactly physically safe, but it held a certain amount of prestige, so I think it'll look good on my CV. Not many references these days, but I don't think that matters. I became disillusioned with that job after something happened and I realized I couldn't trust the higher-ups and I left. So far, so normal. Then for a time I was out of work and just getting by. But then back in 2017, I was recruited to be part of an organization I didn't care for. I didn't feel like I really had another choice. At the time, I thought I could keep my head down and just get through it and things would be all right. But it quickly became clear that wasn't the case. My manager, such as he was going through some things. His manager was intelligent and seemed to be on top of things, and we knew he was up to something. He actually ended up in prison for a bit there, but he got out, the slimy bastard. Feel free to cut that if it's not appropriate, but it's mild compared to what I could call him. In short, it was not a good place to work, and things kept escalating. Then, well, things happened. The world changed. You know. Everyone knows. We all went through it. I won't go into detail about my personal experience. Everyone's was different. It's over now. In the course of it, my place of work was destroyed. It's lost to the world, and now I'm free. But I lost someone. many someones, I suppose, but one someone in particular. And without her, I don't really know who to ask what's next. I'm living with some friends for now, 2 of them, a couple. They're great. We met at horrible workplace. We saw some bad shit together. They knew the woman I lost too. We've all lost so much more than her, even if she's the one for me. And they're really good. They insist I'm fine, that they like my company, that I don't need to pay rent, that I can just get a job whenever I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready, but it itches just being there all the time. I need to stand up. I need some moments truly alone. I need money, I guess. I can't believe after all that happened, money and rent are still a thing. It seems unfair somehow. But I can't go back to what I did before. Even if it still existed, I wouldn't want to. And something similar to either that or the job I had before, it just seems like poking old hurts. How the hell do I decide what to do? And how do I get a job I'm not qualified for? It's funny. As I type this, I think about someone I knew and what his answer might have been to that question. We weren't even friends most of the time. Not really. And now I'm almost smiling when I think about if I should lie on my CV. It worked for him. Sort of. Thanks for any answer. Yours, BTH.
We do this?
I can do Abigail voice. It's fine. Just give me a second. I'm going to get the jobs tonight. Dear BTH, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. Things changed that days, and no one was untouched. For what it's worth, I'm sure your friends really are glad to have you around and don't want you to feel pressured into paying rent. So I doubt you do have to push yourself if you're not ready. That said, every single person is different, and what for some people is restful healing, for others becomes unbearable boredom. I will say that depending on your financial situation, it may not have to be paid work. You may find in the short term you prefer to do something voluntarily. I'd also encourage, if you can, seeking out a support group. I appreciate there's a real lack of availability of trained mental health professionals at the moment, what with waiting lists being as they are. However, there are a lot of locally organized groups springing up. Some can be better than others. There's a lot of resourcing online about things to look out for searching, but they can be helpful as a starting place. Regarding deciding what specifically to do, I'm afraid nobody can answer that but yourself. If you don't have any one specific job that calls to you, try and brainstorm what you do want. Indoors versus outdoors. On your feet versus at a desk versus working with your hands. Sales, teaching, coding, medical, mechanical, etc. There's some online quizzes you could take if you fancy, although don't feel beholden to the results. You might find after a tumultuous few years what's really calling to you is an extremely boring office job. You might find you want to get paid part-time so you can pursue other interests in your other time. And remember, what you decide now is not permanent. You're obviously felt stuck in some difficult jobs in the past, but if you think you want to be a barista and then hate it on the second day, just quit. You owe it to yourself, and you can afford to job hop a few times before it looks bad on a resume. The job hunting market is extremely active and volatile at the moment. This is a good thing for job seekers. There's a lot of people reevaluating what they want to do with their lives, meaning there are a lot of jobs on offer as everyone moves around. You might think that you not need to worry as much about reference checks as you would have done historically, given all that happening, but be warned that some businesses have gone in the opposite direction with far more stringent background and reference checking. You've likely seen the fallout when someone high profile is revealed to have been directly responsible for causing harm. If a company's in a position where they can afford a reference check, they're often doing so. That's not a death knell, as many HR departments understand that people's references may have died or be out of contact. But if your references are all unavailable, be warned that some potential employers will take that poorly. Also, please don't lie on your resume. Check out my tag, Resume Writing, for some tips. The world hasn't changed that much. Even if your experience isn't relevant, you should be able to pick out what to emphasize and how. And if not, you may need to work from a more junior position, but that may turn out to be the break you're looking for.
Honestly, OP, I get you. I've been doing the same old office job for 20 years, and what happens? Literal hell on earth. Anyway, I'm going to Poland next week. I do not have a job lined up, but I do have a cousin with a spare room.
Oh, damn, good for you.
I haven't quit my job, but we've unionized.
Wow, that gives me so much serotonin. I'm high-fiving you over the internet.
Thank you. Management are losing their minds, but for real, it's like we did not survive the horrors for this.
Does that mean I can get a high five too? Also unionized, and so's half the company.
High five for you.
Yeah, ditto. I can't afford to change jobs or anything, but this feels like it might be something, you know? Just like a little bit of hope.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I need this job, but like after everything I've seen now, union-busting shills are a lot less scary, you know? We can do this.
Yo, I'm not moving to Poland, although nice one, but I have gotten divorced, moved 3 states over, and started in a completely new industry. And I'm learning to surf.
Awesome.
That sounds nice. How did you deal with starting over, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm back to nearly entry level, and in some ways that sucks. I have to budget way more carefully than I did, but I'm finally free of all those things I thought I wanted, I thought made me happy, were actually just dragging me down. I'm just so much less scared than I was. I faced the worst thing in the world, you know? Gotta be up from here.
I hope so.
Sending hugs if they're wanted, OP. I feel you. I still have my old job, but I feel so stuck. I know this is the time that I shouldn't be scared, but God, what now? After everything that happened, I don't want to deal with more upheaval.
Yeah, that's a mood. Some of my friends have got this new lease of life, and for me, I just feel like I'm being left behind. I know I should probably try a support group or something, but honestly, I just want to hide under my bed.
It's okay. We'll get there. We'll get somewhere. I don't know where, but it's okay if it takes us a bit of time, I think.
Thanks, Mads. I hope we do.
Oh man, OP. I'm sorry about your lost job. That sounds awful.
At least they didn't work in a cult, lol.
Ah, all-time award for fucked up workplace.
Oh man, cult guy! I missed him! I hope he and Marvin are okay.
Not to be weird or anything, but OP did say one of their managers went to jail, right?
Lots of people go to jail, lol. It doesn't mean anything.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
This was all in the before times. We had this guy who emailed a bunch. At first, it just seemed like he had this weird workplace, but it turned out it was really screwed up cults with murders and stuff. Hang on, I'll find his posts.
Here's his tag with all of his posts if you want to read them. You will need ages and a drink or two.
Thank you. I think I have some reading to do.
Enjoy. It'll make you so grateful for your own job.
Update regarding Cult Guy. Hey y'all. Longtime readers likely remember Cult Guy, a semi-regular contributor to the blog between 2015 and 2018 in the form of emails about his incredibly screwed up workplace that turned out to be a cult. If you're not and you'd like to be, his tag is here to catch up. It's quite a read. A couple of weeks ago, I received a perfectly ordinary email, linked here, from someone called BTH. In the course of the comments, someone brought up Cult Guy inevitably linked BTH to the backlog of his posts. BTH has now gotten in touch with an update. In case there's any doubt or confusion, she's provided me absolute proof of her identity and of Cult Guy's, as well as proof of their shared employment. I have known Cult Guy's real name for a number of years, as well as other details about his situation, and I am absolutely confident that she is exactly who she says she is. Okay.
Here we go.
Dear Abigail, after the comments on the email of mine you published, I wanted to write again. I called myself BTH, but your regular readers apparently know me as Basima. I currently live with Melody and George. I was linked to the emails sent in by someone you know as Cult Guy. The three of us sat down and read through them all, and now I'm writing this update. It's coming from me since I wrote before, but Melody and George are right here with me, and I'm not saying anything without the three of us agreeing. We probably won't be in the comments of this post much or return to this blog for the sake of our privacy and his. The emails Cult Guy wrote over the years cover a very difficult period in all of our lives, and much of that story is not for public consumption. However, it seems he was fond of you all, of this blog and the commenters, and he never liked unsolved mysteries, so we doubt he'd want to be left as one. Because of that, we thought we'd give you one final update. The man you know as Cult Guy died. He died with Marvin, and here George would like to say, oh my god, these stupid pseudonyms, why on earth did he bother? They were together at the end. I think they were even happy for a time, although not for long enough. To all the commenters who say work-like relationships are annoying, you're right. They're the worst. We all just wish they were still around to be annoying. Dahlia died too, long before them. She was my person. All three of them died because they wanted to save people. Each other, us, strangers they'd never met, anyone they could. It was complicated. They weren't heroes. God, I can't imagine how much they'd hate to be thought of as such. We know they were doing what they thought was right, but they weren't fucking heroes. They were friends, sometimes, and sometimes not. The irony is, if they'd survived, we'd probably have all fallen out, although perhaps, given a bit of time and distance, we could have been friends again. It's so hard to see all the what might have beens if they'd lived. But they didn't. So instead, the three of us have got to move on. George would like to say thanks for looking out for him. Melody would like to say it's always worth quitting your toxic job. I don't really have anything else to say. I'll get there, I suppose. Thanks, Basima. Dear Basima, Melody, and George, thank you so much for letting me and the community here know what happened. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I can't even begin to express how grieved I am to learn this. While he was frequently baffling, we all did become very fond of your friend, who, as you say, allowed himself to be dubbed Cult Guy. I already dreaded hearing this news, although I suppose it's better to hear it than to never really know. Please do let us know if there's an online memorial fund we can donate to or anything similar, although I appreciate the need for privacy. Warmest regards, Abigail.
No.
Rip Cult Guy and Marvin.
I can't believe it.
No.
He seems so nice, even with the whole horrible cult business.
Did this have something to do with the aberration?
I mean, given the timing, it seems pretty obvious they ended up dying during it.
Yeah, but I mean, his last letter, he talked about Eli planning something and him trying to stop it. And in the above letter, Basima says they were trying to save people.
Wait, so your theory for what caused a nightmare realm of hell on Earth where the laws of all physics broke down and unimaginable suffering happened is that some guy did it and some other guy stopped it?
Okay, yeah, fine. When you put it like that, it seems pretty ludicrous.
God, I can't believe it. I always thought he'd be back someday and tell us about his stupid escape and probably obnoxious romance. It's awful.
Basima, thank you for your kind words. You asked about donations. I'm sure he wouldn't expect anything. We don't have a fund or anything, but if you wanted to donate to local LGBTQIA plus funds or to cat charities in his or Marvin's name, I'm sure he would have appreciated it. I got you.
Fuck you for the cat charities. There we go.
Oh, okay, come on.
Okay.
Come on. You can do it. We're almost there.
Thank you. I'm sorry for your loss. Of them and of Dahlia, too. I'll donate something. I'm sure some of the others here will, too. We never talked outside of these comments, but I liked him. He seemed like a good guy. Not too much to ask a privacy issue. Do you have a name we should donate to? Cold guy seems odd.
You're not wrong there. All right, what the hell? It's only one of the most common names in the English language. His name was John.
John and Marvin. Thank you. I don't know whose lives they were trying to save. I'm grateful they tried.
Thank you. No, sorry, I can't do it. Privacy be damned. John and Martin. The little shit in his stupid pseudonyms.
Thank you. I won't ask what the rest of your names are. From John and Martin, though. May they rest in peace.
Opal! How
Opal!
dare you?
Opal!
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. There's apparently one more chapter.
Opal.
All right, let's all breathe.
Opals.
My dear God.
Opals.
Okay. Last notes. So there's one more chapter. This is not the end. I don't want to say the end is, but if you want to hit click here for the mildest possible spoiler. Okay. Next chapter.
Next chapter.
Okay. Extremely sad Abigail fan art for chapter 5.
Oh my God.
Ooh.
Oh my God.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I'm putting this in the Discord because that might have to be stream art next week. Please stop.
Oh my God.
Oh,
I'm
my
very,
heart.
I'm very glad you use your powers. Well done, Avalish. I'm very glad that you use your powers for good.
Oh,
Also,
God.
how dare you?
Very dare. Chapter 6. Epilogue. What to do when you're worried you won't live up to expectations at a new job. A reader in a new job with a difficult work-life history has emailed in for advice about settling in.
Dear Abigail, I hope this email finds you well. I've never written into you specifically before, though I suppose you could call me a long-time fan of the column. I've found myself in a situation where I could use some advice. Hope you'll forgive me for saying I'd rather not become a long-time contributor and that this is a one and done sort of thing. My recent past has been complicated. Myself and my fiancé, both he, him, have recently relocated to a completely new place. We have no family or connections here, and this is fine. It's probably for the best. Before we relocated, we were both employed by members of an organization that's turned out to be an extremely harmful cult. We didn't realize this until we were in too deep. We both had experiences that were unpleasant, some of which aligned and some of which diverged entirely. We are both talking to professionals as much as we can. This context is necessary for my email, but to be extremely clear, I would prefer not to go into the details of my time there. My therapist has used the words toxic and abusive, terrifying. The only positive thing that can be said for it is that it is where I met my fiancé. Frankly, I'd rather we met in a coffee shop. I have recently found part-time work for the first time since our escape. My fiancé has been working part-time for a couple of months already. It suits him, I think, to be around people again. Suits him even more that he can come back to me and tell me what he was up to and how normal it all was. I wasn't sure I was ready. But something dropped into my lap, and it seemed perfect. It's nothing like my last job, the one at the cult. I mean, in this new role, I have scheduled hours, break times. Weapons aren't allowed, and it seems to actually be enforced. Or at least nobody has even tried. Nobody hates me. The other day, a customer started getting angry with me, and my manager interrupted and pulled them off. Instead of just leaving it to be my problem. My co-workers are really nice. Extremely nice. Almost overly nice.
I'm trying to find out how much higher your voice can go.
They're kind in a way I can't be. kinder than I deserve. They adjust shifts if I have a medical appointment, and they invite me out for drinks and don't get annoyed if I can't make it. And they're nice to Marvin, my fiancé, and keep telling me he's a catch. He is, whenever he pops in.
Oh, this is John.
My question is, how do I stop them realizing the truth about me? I'm not nice. Not like they are. I can't even begin to explain how wrong they are to treat me so. On the most surface of levels, I'm irritable and quick to judge, and God, I can't even stand on my bad leg, so they have to do the heavy lifting, and I've been told before I have a really weird, intense stare. None of them have said anything. That doesn't even go into everything I've done. I'm not a good person. I cannot stress this enough. Please do not give me platitudes here. You do not know my history with my prior organization.
Shelf down on top of yourself a little bit more, John.
I don't know how to be the person they seem to think I am. I keep waiting for them to realize the other shoe to drop. How do I not mess up this job? Or should I quit before they start to hate me? Thank you for your help. Not an occult guy.
Dear not an occult guy. All right, I won't give you platitudes. I will assume that in your history as part of this cult, you've done despicable, truly despicable things. You wouldn't be the first, and you unfortunately won't be the last. Cults themselves are extremely outside my wheelhouse, and I'm glad to hear you and your fiancé are talking to professionals. I hope you'll consider sharing the contents of this letter and my reply with either or both of your therapists and your fiancé, should you feel comfortable doing so. I'm sure you've cut your letter for brevity, but I want to be extremely clear about all this. All the examples of behavior you've listed of niceness and kindness for your coworkers are extremely normal behavior in a non-toxic workplace. Let me spell this out in detail. Your manager should manage, which includes taking over when customers are being difficult, dealing with the flack, smoothing things over. Flexible shifts aren't always possible, but when they are, this is ideal, as we all have commitments outside of work. If there are workplace social events or happy hours, you should be included in the invite, and they should be non-mandatory. Your coworkers should be friendly and kind to and about your partner, and depending on your personal relationship and your personalities, they might be quite happy to tell you so, although to be clear, if it makes you uncomfortable, you should be able to tell them to stop, and they should respect that. If you have any illnesses, injuries, or disabilities that prevent you from doing certain duties, reasonable accommodations should be made, including being restricted as to the weight you can lift or the amount of walking you can do. You should not be working longer than your contracted hours, and you should be taking all your breaks. Nobody should be commenting on how you look or saying your stare is weird. Apparently, that's a completely inappropriate word choice. Nobody should hate you. They may not be your best friend, but they should be polite and professional in all dealings with you, and you should do the same back. Absolutely nobody should be bringing unauthorized weapons into your place of work. Now, to be clear, many workplaces fail on one or some of these measures. Some of the above are legal requirements in some jurisdictions, like some countries bar weapons entirely, where in others, armed security guards are common. Others may simply be down to the individual organization. However, the fact that you can comfortably tick them off is a sign that your place of work is probably a good one, and that your coworkers do meet more than a minimum bar for legal standards. So to stress again, your coworkers and your manager are not being extremely nice or kind. They are being good professional coworkers in a good professional place of work. I hope you don't mind the detail with which I'm emphasizing this, but your past history, as you've explained it, combined with your email, leads me to believe that your internal perception of what is good or normal versus what is toxic may have been thrown off. You ask how to not mess this up, as if you assume that's a guarantee. It isn't. You might very well be excelling, and you might continue to excel. However, to find that out can be stressful, even for someone without a history in an abusive workplace. So here's my specific advice. It sounds like your manager is supportive and professional. Can you ask them about how your performance is? If such an open-ended question feels a bit too much, you could ask a specific one, like, hey boss, I've been in charge of the X thing here for a month now. I've seen our customers really like the thing I tried, but last week's wasn't such a hit. Have you got some time to take a look? If you've got coworkers who've been training you or mentoring you, asking them for feedback can be helpful. Aim to mirror their kind and professional helpfulness with the same of your own. You don't have to keep a record of exactly who swapped shifts with you, but if people are flexible with you, be flexible back. Show up to things on time, honor commitments you've made, and if you can't meet a deadline or if you need help, you're better telling people earlier so they can help plan or cover for you than later, which causes stress for everyone. Perhaps more importantly, try to be, if not so positive it's toxic, then at least pleasantly neutral and companionable. Remember, the person you are at work is not your whole entire self. It's an aspect of yourself. It's a good idea to keep certain things, politics and religion, for example, off limits for work conversations. This limits the likelihood of either controversial conversation or gossip. And finally, try to be honest with yourself. If you need to cut back your hours or you end up not liking the job after a few months, that's not a failure. If I were to ask the commenters how many jobs they've had each, some of the most successful will have stories of being in entirely wrong place at the wrong time. Finally, I don't want to get too philosophical with you or make assumptions about your history, and I appreciate the topic is incredibly personal. However, I think you'll find if you do enough reading around on the subject and meet enough people, there are hundreds of thousands who would say everyone, no matter what their background, deserves certain simple kindness. Be kind to those you work with and allow them to be kind to you in return. And if you ever find that equality breaking down again, I am earnestly asking you to leave as soon as you can. I promise you do deserve that. Not in a cult guy.
Thank you, Abigail. It's been a journey to get here. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that the journey is not over. I appreciate your advice, as always.
My pleasure, OP. You're doing all the right things so far. Look after yourself.
OP, I don't want to overstep or anything. I don't get the cult thing. But a lot of us here have seen some toxic workplaces in our time. Even from a totally normal, regular, evil workplace, it can take a lot of hard work to get out of that mindset. Rooting for you, dude. I reckon loads of other readers are too.
I sure am. Best of luck, OP.
For the sake of OP, who's clearly had a time of it, I'm sitting on my hands to avoid starting a comment thread called Tell Me About the Most Toxic Thing That Ever Happened at Work.
Maybe leave it for the next off-topic thread.
Let me know when and I'll come and win the thread.
Oh, God. Part of me is curious, but part of me really doesn't want to know.
You got this, OP. Honestly, most managers love being asked for feedback. Like, of all Abigail's points, this one probably seems the most intimidating, but it shows you're interested in their performance. And if they could tell you minor things that more regularly, they give you something to work on versus waiting for appraisals, that's great. Biggest career improvements for me came when I started regularly asking for feedback. Thank you. I will definitely think about that. My last manager at the cult was not exactly someone I wanted to talk to, so it's not something I've considered before.
The main way to think about it is that if your manager is short-tempered or insulting, that's actually their mistake as a manager. If they've constructive feedback for you, it might not always be easy to hear, but it should be delivered helpfully and give you specific changes to make. Anything else, then, if you're stuck at your job, it's actually there for you, not.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I never thought about it like that, although possibly I should have known that before my previous job made me manage people.
I'm shocked the cult didn't offer you management training, OP. Just kidding. Look, I wouldn't beat yourself up about it too much. It takes a lot of work and support to learn how to manage people effectively. Just make sure you know what training and support you'll get the next time you're offered any sort of supervisory position. I promise that's a good step.
Only being an asshole manager was the worst thing I'd done. Thanks, though. Even if I don't think I'll be looking to manage anyone again in the future.
OP, I don't give a shit who you are or what you've done or say you deserve. Work is, and can be, a miserable, soul-destroying experience. Everyone deserves to be met with dignity because no one has a choice but to engage in the system. If you treat people nicely, you deserve to be treated nicely back. That's it. That's the equation. Fuck capitalism. Join a union.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot.
OMG, would you please shut the hell up about capitalism?
I think a round of applause is in order.
Oh.
God damn, Opals.
I love that JG Hex doesn't give up.
And yeah, as Wendy's pointed out, JG's the same in every universe. That's amazing.
Right? Exactly. My brain is like, what was it like for him during the operation? Right? You know, you just kind of like start thinking about stories and all the different stories that spoke. How dare you make us emotional, Opal? I'm very emotional. There's a JG in every universe making unions happen. And God bless him for it, right?
Carry on, my wayward son.
Apologies to Wendy that we have run late, but that was the appropriate thing to bring to a close for the evening. Now, before we kind of go into our little this was perfect, and I will never shut up about it. It was, and so was the GDPR one.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Before we go into kind of the little wrap-up task, I need I'll just do this 3 minutes. I need 3 minutes of your time, if you please. Because you see, we need to know.
We've cleaned out.
We need to know what's going to happen.
We've not done this in a while.
That's it. We've finished the Antimemetics novel. We've finished our big, wonderful shenanigan. The tanks are ready to be restocked, and it is time to decide: are we going to read some more stuff? Are we going to do some more? Wendy's like, I'm on holiday, so I don't have to get up in the morning. I have to get up in the morning, but that's okay. So it is time for you to vote. There's a poll running right now. It'll be running for about 3 minutes, probably 2.5 at this point. Let us know what it is you're interested in. We have a bunch of different various options, she says, tapping over to the list in the Discord. So for fiction, we've got a whole bunch of other things. There's more from Quantum. As mentioned, there is I think it's a 5-point SCP control fanfic that I'm dying to get my hands on. A Task Force Omega Zero story.
Task Force Daisy, the commandos who take the high ground and work from the afterlife, the Nusferix folks.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay. There's another M.R. James story.
Oh yeah, I think I found an M.R. James we haven't done.
And there's the whole Karnaki stories as well. So old school supernatural detective.
Also, there are 5 of the stories from Valuable Humans in Transit are available on Quantum's website.
Oh, sweet. So we've got more SCP stuff. We've got more kind of classic public domain horror stuff. We've got some fiction options. And then when it comes to games, we've got a whole bunch of options. We've got... Oh, these are the other links, aren't they?
Yes, I think I did the story second. So if you want to scroll up a little bit further...
Okay, fine. I'm scrolling.
Should get to the...
Viewfinder, Zalia, you started playing that game. We've been looking at that one for a while. What's the M.R. James game that showed...
Haunting of Hobbs Barrow, in which Shogo Miyakita, who was our friend from Secret of St. Kilda, is one of the primary
voice actors. Are we planning to go back to Inscription at any point? We probably should, to be honest, but at this point I might start the game over because I feel like I've done so poorly.
We got an interesting question from Rebecca asking where the poll is.
It's right here at the top of the chat. Well, it is for me. It depends on what your experience is. It should be running on Twitch right now. So if you're on the Twitch app, you should see it. If you're in a browser, it should have popped up at the top of the chat. That's where it is for me.
And with the games, I did put the list up there, but I can't see it. Maybe it's further down.
A list of trailers for new possible games.
Oh, it's a YouTube playlist. Sorry, I was being too stupid, being too smart for my own good.
It looks like the poll is completed. And
games, please.
The games has edged it out just by one. Hello, Tin
Tin Can Audio. Hello.
How are you, Amber? It's wonderful to see you. Hello, everybody. You're here just in time for us to wrap up. We just finished the poll about what to do next week. So, hello, everyone. I'm sorry we are actually getting ready to go. I want to hear all about how the music creation went. Let us know when you get a chance. We've just finished. We had a freaking fantastic interview with Quantum, the author of There Is No Antimemetics Division.
Mm-hmm.
And we just finished reading the totally emotional shenanigans that came to a happy, soppy conclusion.
Totes emotion.
10 minutes of
glorious desert vibes.
Desert vibes, yes, exactly. It might have been dessert vibes.
I want dessert vibes.
I want dessert vibes. I want dessert now. I'm always willing to have dessert, by all means.
So games wins.
It looks like it's going to be a game. So we'll go through our list. And how about this? We'll tell you more on Sunday. We'll know by Sunday. So that segues quite nicely. Thank you. On to where you can find us the rest of this week.
Coming up on Friday, we have the next issue of our, now I can say this again, it feels great, award-nominated Pop Culture newsletter, The Full Lid, which will include a whole bunch of podcasting stuff, some great shows you may have missed, and an in-depth...
Keep talking, I have to get a link for the chat.
And an in-depth review of the first 9 episodes of Craig Habak Asks Questions Later, the fantastic new David K. Barnes fronted show.
Because people have to also... There's a Kickstarter running for one of my favorite all-time comics that is going into animation.
Do you want to just put the link to the pilot episode in the chat as well? Because it's so freaking good. And it's up on YouTube for nothing.
Well, no, because then I have to go looking for it. But
okay.
If you are an old school online comic fan like I am, Lackadaisy, the fantastic
Prohibition era New Orleans Cats.
New Orleans jazz musician Cats. Their comic is now coming out in hardcover trades, and they've animated it. There is a short movie. It's like 20 minutes
25 minutes long, 1 episode. It is so freaking good.
It's wonderful. It's on BackerKit right now. They're already north of $500,000. If they get to $1 million, we're going to get like a whole season.
5-episode season, yeah.
There are plushies. There are plushies of Mordecai and of Rocky.
They've now unlocked Ivy and Freckles.
And of Ivy, and they are the bestest thing in the world.
Oh, Freckle, my little guy.
You poor little man.
Love my little guy.
Exactly. But international evil shipping costs on those print comics is going to be evil. Yeah. I'm there with you, Ozzy. I understand. But they do have digital versions as well. So Mordecai's so good, and he's voiced by Sung-Won Cho.
Yes.
The Princess Senpai and Snack Guy, and he talks lots about different anime.
And he has dropped his voice all the way.
It's so good. Down. He's so good as Mordecai. He's so good. It's wonderful. So enjoy that. There are PDF versions available that avoid the shipping. There are plushies for those of us who are plushie obsessed. Please partake. Enjoy.
Yes.
So
anyway, the full lid's on Friday, and it's got all kinds of.
I feel like I should have tangented
myself. I think a retroactive tangent. I've listened to enough Torchwood to know retcon's a thing. You're fine.
I'm wondering if I can turn it off again. Hold on. Built the automation too greedily and too deep. There we go. Okay. There we go.
That hits very differently, having seen the episode of Game Changer where one of the rounds is name a special effect and we'll put it over this sequence, and one of the contestants just yells, buttholes. And across the course of the next minute, buttholes begin to appear everywhere.
Oh my God.
And they're animated.
Why?
I know. So, yeah.
Now we have to go to bed on that image. That is not pleasant.
So, full it on Friday. Then on Sunday, we are continuing with Coffee Talk. If you have not yet caught up with the Valhalla, the last episode is very much the one you want to see. Especially if you like Dark Side Detective.
The guys
oh my God.
Like buff. Like compared to Officer Georgie, they are beefcake. And that's McQueen, not even Dooley.
Dooley is an actual human-sized door.
Yes. And they were both there in last week's episode. It was so good. It was so delightful. Boy, Coffee Wizard! which is now like the desktop on my computer screen. Yes, exactly. It was delightful. Get thyself to Valhalla if you missed last week's Coffee Talk, but we will be continuing.
We've got a couple of weeks in Coffee Talk yet.
Really?
It's a 16-day game. We're on day 10.
Oh, sweet. So we've got at least two more
I
days
would guess. Assume 3 days an episode, you know.
Exactly. So that will be on Sunday morning, Sunday A&M. Come and join us for coffee and coffee.
Yes. So that was an amazing show. I had so much fun.
My voice is gone, but that was
your voice is
great
toasted.
Conversation. Just such a really good interview. I really like that a whole lot. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to Quantum again for being our interview guest.
Thank you
for voting in the poll.
Thank you to our amazing mods.
I have a feeling we're going to play that Hobbs Barrow.
I think it's very likely it's going to be Hobbs Barrow.
Because it's an M.R. James
this is it.
sort of thing. We got to tell Preemie, we're doing the M.R. James game. Come watch. Exactly. And Sunday I shall be in a field pretending to be a fantasy character. Oh, cool. Are you
Jolly
laughing?
good.
That sounds delightful. I do not wish to be in a field. Next weekend, we're going to a wedding next weekend, aren't we?
Which might be in a field in a moment of sweeping irony.
No. It will not be. But next Sunday, we will not be streaming as a result. But we'll talk about that next week. I shall also be in that field. People in fields. Enjoy. All right. I think that's everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. I've been Alasdair.
I've been Marguerite.
And there is no Antimemetics division. We'll see you next time.
Good night.